My wife found this pattern to crochet up some of these little gnomes in one of her magazines, and we looked at them, and she wanted to share a story about them too. So I actually volunteered to make some laser engraved chairs for him to go on. So I had this piece of ash that I had cut years ago. I brought it up in the house for a couple weeks to do the final drying, and it wasn't a really good piece. It was kind of cut a little wavy and stuff, and decided I was going to use that. And then I got some plywood, and I hacked out a prototype chair that they would fit in. This side here I cut on the jigsaw, and then I kind of put it together, and I put together another side for the CNC over here, and decided that's how I was going to cut them out. Now, I ripped something in my shoulder a couple weeks ago, and for a while it wasn't really too usable, so I never did get out in my shop to do the final machining to finish up my big CNC machine that I'm making. So I decided I'm going to use that little Ortor or Fuero to make this. And I have to start out all my projects by ripping down the wood to be 8 inches or less wide, because that's all my joiner will handle. And you can see this stuff wasn't really cut perfectly, and it warped some when it dried and stuff. Must have had a dull blade on this cut, that's why it's been laying around. But it's clear ash from the backyard, so I only need about 3/8 thick, so I'll be able to get enough out of it. And I do get a lot of kindling wood too, so I get it cut down to 8 inches, and then it's over to the joiner and start by flattening one side on it, as I always do in all my projects when working with the rough cut wood. And it was a little tough going in when I first started making these a while back, because I still had that one arm that wasn't really moving too good. But every day it's been getting a little better now, and as long as I take it easy on it, I don't try lifting anything or moving anything too bad. There's just a little pain left in it now, so that's a good thing. So once you get one side flattened, it's over to the planer, and you can see there, I had to set it for the thickest part, so you have to do several passes through to get everything down to that when you're dealing with wood that's this wonky. So a couple passes through the planer to get it all to the pretty much an even thickness, and then I just wound up planing it all down to, I started out with 7/16 thick for the side pieces. And then I actually planed the back and seat down a little bit thinner to 3/8 later after I cut out the sides. So this is one of those things that always takes some time to prepare your wood to get going with projects like this when you use rough cut. And then this Ferrero that they had sent me, turned out it was an engineering sample for me to run some tests on and stuff. I did make a video about it, but the final one should be here soon. And I had some problems with noise and vibration, and I decided to change out the lead screws and the nuts in it to Delrin nuts, and that actually fixed most of it. So I'm using it here for cutting these pieces out. Now I can only cut one at a time, and then I have to flip the board and move it because I don't have enough travel to do two at once. But it still did get the job done nice. It took about 35 minutes a piece to cut them, and I did not cut any of the other features or grooves in them, because then it would have doubled the time, and I would have had left and right hand ones. So I figured that would be quicker to do later. So I had to cut 10 pieces out because I'm making 5 chairs, so it did take me like a whole day to just cut them, and they did come out really nice in the end, so I'm real happy with the quality of them. And this little machine did do a good job, and I can't wait to get the real one with all the offline controller that works and everything. And a little while later I got a pile of scrap there, and there's that board. It's 10 sides and then some pieces for the backs and the seats. So now it's time to start trimming the back pieces and the seat pieces to size. And I just set up the stops on this sled here, and use that to cut everything square into size. And then once I got that done, I went back and put on a couple dado blades there to cut the grooves for the seat and the sides of the chairs. And again, I set up the stops on this, and it would have taken over half an hour to add those features with that little CNC machine to each of these pieces, and it took me like 10 seconds with this. So it definitely was the fastest way, and I could decide which was the best side to put out to, so I didn't have right and left-handed ones to start out with. So I cut one side, then I moved the stops, and I just set up and cut the other sides. So that made it a real easy job, and didn't take too long, and they all came out basically perfect. Really, these little things really turn into being more work than building full-scale projects, it seems like to me. Then I had to put the groove in the back for the back, so I just put a blade in my a cutter in the router table, and getting that all set up here to cut the groove. Having everything right there, and there's a little electronic control for getting the elevation perfect and stuff. Really makes it easy to use. I'm really happy the way this router table works. You can see I can move it like a couple 10,000ths at a time to get it the exact depth so that everything comes out square. So I got the depth set, and then I'm going to go back and I have to put a 3/8 deep groove off the face of that extrusion there. So I set that up, and then I actually backed it off once I set the 0 to do 2 cuts, because it would have ripped it. It would have done a lot of tear out if I did it all in one. You can see I put stops on there, and I have to do a left and a right hand one. And I did not bother to hook up the dust collection hose. I still have a little bit of routing to do for the CNC router, and hooking the hose up to this properly. So you can see I had a vac in between each piece. And then I just stepped the fence back to 0, and just doing the final cut here on them. So that it really sped it up, and made it a lot easier on the programming when you're using that easel program for the CNC, because you can't really put dimensions on that. So there they are, all roughed out, and the size I want stuff. And I did do some printouts of my wife's poem that's going on the back of them there. And I finally got the right size, the right character spacing, and everything to make it fit centered and fit nice in the area. And then it's over to the little Artur laser here to start engraving them. And you can see when you engrave with the laser, you do get a little bit of a black stud around the edge of it, and I'll show you in a second. But I found out that to get rid of that, don't try to sand it off like that. What I do is I spray it, and there you can see I'm using light burn. That works really good. But what I do is I spray it with a Rust-Oleum clear quick drying finish. I put a good coat of that on it, and then I go back and I sand that off completely, and the black goes away without smudging into the wood. And there I'm doing the outline, but I did have the speed set a little fast on the outline. That's running like 5,000 millimeters a minute. So, but there's that crystal clear enamel. I spray it with that, and then I take and I sand it all off, and I get a perfectly clear edge with no smudging or anything like that. And then it's time to flip the seats over and burn a little logo in the bottom of them there. And that, that's another great thing with this laser. It's really been handy to have. And now I decided where I wanted to cut the tops, and I put a little radius on there, and I just over it to scroll saw. I just this Harbor Freight scroll saw. This thing works really good. I'm just kind of hacking it off outside the line, and then over to my favorite tool in the shop, this jet sander here, and just go back, and you can clean up perfectly to a line with that thing. It's just such a nice, smooth running sander. I really love this thing. And it was like, one after the next. It took over an hour to engrave each one, so, I did have plenty of time to work because I had 5 of them. And then the Roman gnome's friend is the elf. So I found an image of an elf online, and I decided I was going to put the elf on the back of the chair so you'd always have the elf around. So I got the image in light burn there, and then I just I burned it on the backs of all of them, and there they are, kind of held together with rubber bands just to see how the elf fit and everything, or the gnome fit and everything. And it looked good. So the only last thing to do before assembly is go back. I want some keyhole slots in there, so if you want to hang them on the wall, you can do that too. So I put the T-slot cutter in the router table, and I'm just going to drop it down on the cutter and then just move it forward. Cut the slot and then shut it off and wait for the router to completely stop before trying to remove it. And if you don't do this, you can wind up with a mess, and don't ask me how I know. But there it is. Like a perfect T-slot, and that will hold the head of a screw and lock on there, and it just, it's all centered and stuff, and that way it won't fall off the wall or anything. So that was the last move, and then I had to do some final sanding before the assembly, and now it's time to go back and glue everything up. And again, those little baby glue bottles are really nice for this kind of stuff. Make it so easy to do a nice job without making a mess with the glue and stuff. And getting everything lined up there is, it took a little while. It takes a bunch of clamps. You can never have too many clamps, it turns out. And then I was a little afraid about the back piece actually being able to expand and contract with the season. So I decided to throw a couple of brads of the actually pin nails in there that you don't see to have a little bit extra strength should the glue ever break on that one back piece. So there it is, first one all glued together, and just have to go back now and glue up the other 4. And as they say, you can never have enough clamps. Now, once they were all glued up and I did the final sanding on them, getting ready to put polyurethane on them, and I decided to put some little brads in the bottom of each foot here, just so it wouldn't stick to the cardboard when I polyurethaned them. And I could do the bottom of them also. So the brads work good, and I had a gallon of polyacrylic there, and I decided to do that. And I tell you, I should have bought a spray can of this stuff because it just took me like an hour for each coat to coat these things and get rid of all the drips and runs and sags and stuff. It turned out being worse doing these little chairs than doing an actual large chair. But I did get, I got 2 coats on, it's sanded between the coats, and pretty much they look pretty good. It's not a perfect finish, but, it's good enough for what they are. And then I wanted some little neoprene no-slip feet for the bottom of them, so when you pull the gnome out, the chair won't move around. So I just had some neoprene with a self-adhesive backing on it there, and I'm just using a cheap Harbor Freight gasket punch to punch out some rounds. And as with everything I do, I'm just going back now with Johnson's paste wax with some 4-0 steel wool to kind of try to level out and even out this polyacrylic. And it does do a pretty good job, but like I've said before, this polyacrylic really has to dry for a couple months till you can do a final good sanding on it. So, this is as good as it's going to get, and they didn't come out awful. They did come out pretty good. And then I use some alcohol to wipe off the bottom there just in case I got any wax on it. Makes make sure that the feet still stick, and then just peel off the backing and put the feet on. And I just use a 90% IPA I get at a drugstore. That works pretty good for removing wax and stuff like that when you want to put, anything sticky on. And there's all the printouts I made to get the size right on the back there, and finally, work that out. So you can see each stage has its little bit of work to it to get things to come out looking nice. And, there they are, the final product. And I'm real happy with them, and my wife's really pleased too. This was one of those 5-minute jobs I volunteered for that wound up taking 4 days or more than that, to complete. So there they are. There's all her little crocheted gnomes. She found these in a magazine. I'm going to see if I can find a link to them in case anybody's interested. But they all have their own little chair, and they've got their elf in the back with them. And my wife did write the poem to go with them and explain. And I like the fact that that poem is kind of hidden behind the elf, because you know how kids always like to have a little secret something to show you when they show somebody something. So they'll be able to kind of pull the little gnome out and show the poem. So this is kind of it, from just kind of a rough little prototype here to make sure I could fit it, and started cutting the parts out and fitting them together a little bit at a time. And thank God for this little Ortor laser. This thing really does a great job. I've been enjoying that. And back to the the final chairs here, and they really I think they really did come out nice, and worked out to be a nice little gift with the little crocheted gnomes. I just thought I'd share this, this idea with you. I think it's a pretty cool little idea for a gift, and kind of show you what goes into, thinking your way through the stuff like this, and just fabricating it and making everything work out in the end. And there's always that one little wise-ass gnome that gets drunk and falls off the chair. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe.